and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be continuing with my college football schedule preview and point spread prediction videos with the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the TCU Horned Frogs. So starting with Nebraska, Nebraska's non-conference schedule is very easy, which is something they very badly needed this year because their conference schedule is about as tough as it gets. Now, Ohio, I wouldn't consider a 100% sure win for Nebraska because Ohio is a good group of 5 team, and last year they did beat West Virginia and almost beat Rutgers. And while I know those were bad Power 4 teams last season, it's still not like Nebraska was head and shoulders better than those teams. And in 2023, Ohio beat Iowa State, who that year was about as good as Nebraska has been each of these last 2 years. But Nebraska will get 2 100% guaranteed wins in the non-conference against Bowling Green, who's a bad group of 5 team, and North Dakota, who's an FCS team. So Nebraska will play 6 different conference opponents than they did last year. So last year they played Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, USC, UCLA, and Penn State. And instead this year they will play Indiana, Oregon, Washington, Illinois, Rutgers, and Ohio State. And that makes the conference schedule a whole lot tougher than a year ago, because last year Nebraska avoided all of the elite Big Ten teams, but this year they will play all of them with Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. And by far the toughest back-to-back stretch on this schedule is going to be hosting Indiana and then traveling to Oregon. And these aren't prediction videos yet, but I couldn't imagine Nebraska winning either one of those games. It really couldn't get any tougher back-to-back than that. But Nebraska also has 2 more tough stretches with hosting Washington and then traveling to Illinois and then hosting Ohio State and then traveling to Iowa on a Friday. If I were to grade Matt Rule's performance as Nebraska's head coach overall, I would give him a C- at best, and he's going to have to greatly improve his coaching this year, or I think Nebraska's going 6-6 at best, and he has proven at other schools that he can coach well, but not at Nebraska. Right now, I wouldn't even consider him to be a top 25 coach, because Nebraska also has Ohio State. That is a game that I would give them no chance, and Washington, Illinois, and Iowa, those teams don't really have better rosters than Nebraska does, but they are better coach teams than Nebraska, which is a big reason why Matt Rule is 0-3 against Iowa. But Nebraska's bye week, I think, does come at a perfect time before hosting Washington, because Nebraska, they do have a good home environment, and a win here, I think, could possibly save Matt Rule's job. But Matt Rule does have Nebraska to the point to where they are better than teams like Michigan State, Maryland, and Rutgers, but they're still not close to the point to where you can just pencil these in as wins for them. I still think there's a good chance Nebraska could lose one of those 3 games. And I'd say the ceiling for Nebraska would be at 9-3, and that would only be if everything went right, where their offense continued to improve and their defense got back to playing like it did in Rule's first 2 years there, which would be a big improvement from last season. But if I was a Nebraska fan, I would not be pleased with how the home and away worked out, because you have no chance against Indiana and Ohio State, so you would have rather have just played them on the road and had Illinois and Iowa probably at home. One reason for that is Iowa is a team that is usually much better at home than they are on the road. If there is a minus at the beginning of the spread, that means that Nebraska is the favorite. If there's a plus at the beginning of the spread, that means that they're the underdog. A 20-plus spread is a blowout, and there's two of those, Bowling Green and North Dakota. A 10-19 spread is medium, and there's four of those, Ohio, Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. A 6-9 spread is close, but there'll be a clear favorite, and there's two of those, Maryland and Rutgers. A 1-5 spread means it's almost a complete toss-up, and there's four of those, Michigan State, Washington, Illinois, and Iowa. So if I had to guess the exact spreads for these games right now, I'd say Nebraska will be about a 2-touchdown favorite over Ohio and about a 30-point favorite over Bowling Green and about a 30-point favorite over North Dakota. And I'll say Nebraska will be about a 14-point underdog to Indiana and about a 17-point underdog to Oregon and about a 14-point underdog to Ohio State, because I consider Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State all to be around the same level right now, but Oregon is on the road and Indiana and Ohio State are at home. But while for example, if I think a spread could be in the 10-19 range or the 20-plus range, I'll usually go with the lower one like I did with these. But to be honest, I would not be surprised at all if Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State all beat Nebraska by 30 points. So I'd say Nebraska will be a 5-point favorite over Michigan State, but I wouldn't be surprised if when it comes time for that one to be played, if it's in the 6-9 range. And I'll say Nebraska will be a 9-point favorite over Maryland, but wouldn't be surprised if it comes time for that one, if it's in the 10-19 range. And I'll say Nebraska will be a point favorite over Washington, only because it's at home, though. On the road, I think Washington would be a field goal favorite. And I'll say Nebraska will be a 3-point underdog to Illinois. But at home, I think Nebraska would probably be a very small favorite. And I'll say Nebraska will be a 6-point favorite over Rutgers. But if Nebraska does turn out to be a bad team, because this one's on the road, I think it would probably be in the 1-5 range. And I'll say Nebraska will be a 3-point underdog to Iowa. So TCU's non-conference schedule is a lot easier than it was last year, because while they do play North Carolina again, last year they played SMU. This year they get 2 guaranteed wins against Grambling, who's an FCS team, and Arkansas State, who is sometimes a decent group of 5 team, but shouldn't be of any challenge to TCU So the North Carolina game will be the first game of the 2026 college football season. It'll be a week 0 game played in Ireland. But because that Grambling game is a sure win, that's not a good time for the first bye week. But because they play a week 0 game, they get 2 bye weeks. And I think the second bye week does come at a good time because it comes right before what's really a rivalry game for TCU on the road at Baylor. And while Baylor's not really what you would consider to be a tough place to play, and I think TCU's a good bit better than Baylor. And Baylor, I think, is going to be a bottom half team in the Big 12 again. I do not think this is going to be an easy game for TCU. I think it's going to be close, and I think it's a very losable game for them. And the bye week also comes right after what's going to be a very physical game against BYU. And while I do think Sonny Dykes is a top 20 coach right now, this is not his style of football. Kirk Cignati actually pointed that out because Dykes had said something about Josh Hoover, the quarterback that transferred to Indiana from TCU, having a high interception rate, and Cignati responded to that saying that Hoover at Indiana will have a quarterback's 2 best friends, a great run game and a great defense that he didn't have at TCU. Now TCU had a solid defense last year, but not as good as BYU's, and their run game was terrible last year. They have 5 different conference opponents this year than last year. Last year they played Arizona State, Colorado, Iowa State, Houston, and Cincinnati. And instead this year they will play Central Florida, Kansas, Arizona, Utah, and Texas Tech, and that makes the conference schedule tougher than last year because they play at Texas Tech. And replacing Colorado and Cincinnati with Central Florida and Kansas, though, I'd say is about even in toughness. But that hosting Utah and then going on the road to Texas Tech is by far the toughest back-to-back stretch on this schedule. It's hard for me to imagine TCU winning both of those games. If they could win one of those, I think that would be good. But to have to start the conference schedule on the road, TCU got it good because Central Florida has one of the smallest Power 4 stadiums, and I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the conference. Again, and though having a Friday night road game against Arizona is not good because, well, Arizona is not really what you consider to be the toughest place to play. They're a team that I think is similar to TCU, and with Noah Fafita coming back and Josh Hoover leaving, should have a pretty big quarterback advantage in this game. I'd say with this schedule, TCU's ceiling is 10-2. I think at best they split the games of BYU, Arizona, Utah, and Texas Tech and win all those other 8 games. But I think it's very unlikely that they win all of those other 8 games. But because they have such uncertainty at the quarterback position, I'd say the floor would be pretty low, like 5-7. But I don't think there's much of a chance of that happening. So there are 2 games on here where I think TCU will be a blowout favorite in, Grambling and Arkansas State. And there are 4 games on here where I think TCU will be a 6 to 9 point favorite in North Carolina, Central Florida, West Virginia, and Kansas. And there are 2 games on here where I think TCU will be a 1 to 5 point favorite in Baylor and Kansas State. And there are 3 games on here where I think TCU will be a 1 to 5 point underdog in BYU, Arizona, and Utah. And there's 1 game on here where I think TCU will be a 10 to 19 point underdog in, and that's Texas Tech. So if I had to guess the exact spreads for these games right now, I'd say TCU will be about a 50-point favorite over Grambling and about a 30-point favorite over Arkansas State, and a 8 or 9-point favorite over North Carolina, and a 8 or 9-point favorite over Central Florida, because that one's on the road. At home, that would be in the 10 to 19 range. And I'll say TCU will be a 6-point favorite over West Virginia and a 6-point favorite over Kansas, because those are home games. On the road, they would be in the 1 to 5 range. And I'll say TCU will be a 3-point favorite over Kansas State, but only because it's at home. On the road, I think they would be a slight underdog. And I'll say TCU will be a 3-point underdog to BYU because it's at home. On the road, that would be in the 6 to 9 range. And I'll say TCU will be a 3-point favorite over Baylor, but on the road is why. At home, I think that would make it into the 6 to 9 range. And I'll say TCU will be a 3-point underdog to Arizona because it's on the road. At home, I think TCU would be a slight favorite in that game. And I'll say, even though it's at home, that Utah will be a point favorite over TCU because Utah returns their starting quarterback and TCU doesn't. But I wouldn't be surprised if, when it comes time for that one to be played, if TCU is a slight favorite because they have home field advantage. And I'll say Texas Tech will be a 10-point favorite over TCU, but because it's on the road, at home, I think it would be about a touchdown. So that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.